class. Today I wanted to give you guys some tips on how to annotate a poem. I figured that showing you guys firsthand how to do it may be the easiest way, and that way you can refer back to this video if you ever have any questions about it. So first, what you're going to want to do is figure out the poem. In my case, I wanted to display to you guys the poem Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. So you want to figure out maybe what genre it is beforehand, or remember the different features that, in this case, the romanticism genre usually has. So I put that there's a focus on love and death, and once we see it, you'll see that there's a focus on the sea and nature itself, which is a very common theme in romanticism. And you also want to remember the genre and the type of years that this genre was popular in. In this case, it was the 1800s to the 1850s. You'll also want to figure out how many stanzas it has, and even the rhyme scheme, which we'll figure out in the next slide. So for the first part, I wanted to look at the two first stanzas. So here you can read it where it starts, and the first thing we're going to do is put the rhyme scheme. In this case, you can see that the rhyme scheme is a AB, AB, and CB rhyme scheme. This is stanza 1 of the 6 in the poem. So the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out first thing you're going to want to do is read the whole thing. After you do that, you're going to go stanza per stanza and figure out maybe what they're similar, what there's in common. In this case, after reading the poem, we're going to be able to figure out that "In a Kingdom by a Sea" is one of the lines that is repeated several times during the poem. You can actually see it in this part in the second stanza as well. Also, Annabel Lee, the title of Annabel Lee, is repeated a lot in this poem. So we're going to also highlight that. Okay, so here we see already a couple examples of repetition and an example of the sea, which is one of the features of romanticism. Also, we see the mention of love a couple times, so we're going to highlight that as well. Here's another repetition of one of the other themes of this poem, which I want to make sure to highlight for you guys. Okay, so once we do that, now we're going to get into more of the little tricky things. Here we see that the winged seraphs of heaven is mentioned. This is clearly an allusion to Christianity. So we're going to highlight our allusions in a more subtle color than any of these, if there's possible. So we're going to do purple for the allusions. And here in this case, we don't have any other allusions, so we're going to switch to the next slide, which has the other two stanzas of this poem. Also, before we move on, I kind of wanted to point out the other literary device that we have here, which is alliteration. And here we see it in this line, that a maiden there lived whom you may know. It's alliteration because of that repeated M sound, and I just kind of wanted to point it out to you guys, that way that you can see an example of it firsthand. But that is really all in this section. Obviously, you could look more into the different themes and maybe even other literary devices, but for the purposes of when you're doing an essay, you're going to want to keep it as short and as quick as you can, because most of the time you will be doing it during a test. So just general themes and general literary devices right now. This is really just a guide to give you an idea on how to identify those literary devices. So we're going to see, again, "In this kingdom by the sea" repeated. We also want to see that "My Annabel Lee" is repeated once again several times during these parts. We also get a bit of that Christianity illusion with heaven. And we also get personification of wind, which is giving, objects some human qualities. Here we see that. And like I previously mentioned, this is kind of just a general first look at a poem that you can do when you're doing an essay. It's just helpful to kind of figure out the themes and the, obvious literary devices that will pop up, especially when you're in a bit of time crunch. And it also gives you an idea to figure out maybe what time or what genre of poem this is in. So it's just a quick guide on how to do it and something that you guys can use.